Welcome to Shannons Club TV, where we look back on memorable cars from Australian motoring history.
In each episode, we re-examine our feature car with rare archival images, new perspectives and an owner's well-preserved example.
And if you're in the market, we'll get some expert advice from the Shannons auctions team. So let's get things rolling with the 1970s Australian Ford that is one of our most popular and enduring classics, the XY Falcon.
The XY Falcon of November 1970 was better than its Holden rival, the Ho-Hum HG. Interestingly, one of the least changed Falcon models has always been one of the most celebrated. Essentially, the XY was to the XW what the XP had been to the XM. More of the same, but with extra refinements and harder edged styling. The XY had bigger six-packs. The standard unit was the 130 horsepower 200 and a formidable new 250 was introduced, easily outpowering Holden's optional 186 and 186S engines and giving the little 253 V8, introduced during the life of the HT, a good run for its money. A more highly tuned 2V twin Venturi carburetor, edition of the 250 with 170 horsepower, followed months later. But Mark, it was the V8 engines that the Bathurst boys wanted to know about, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sure was. And most attention was focused on the mighty Cleveland 351 V8 and the new XY GT with its shaker air intake scoop, and particularly the GTHO high performance or competition option, because that car was destined to do some amazing things on the racetrack, which I'll expand on a bit later on.
Cleverly, Falcon brochures promised performance characteristics akin to many V8 engines. Australia was not the US, and while smaller V8 engines soon became very popular, the mainstream market in Australia remained six-cylinder. The Fairmont came standard with the smooth Cruiser-Matic Auto. Imagine the contrast between a manual 186 Premier and its Fairmont rival. Even the mid-range Futura got the 250 engine and front disc brakes. For extra cost, buyers could specify a 302 or 351 V8. As for the fabled XY Shaker GT, it's the most celebrated Falcon ever. This was the kind of car, don't laugh, that could patch up a shaky marriage. Just swap shaker for shaky. I know of this happening. The XY GT in the garage, ushering in a new dream time. Many GT features were optional on lesser variants, and for just $280 you could option up your Fairmont with the 351 V8. $10 more and you got the Bathurst 36-gallon tank. The ZD Fairlane 500 could be optioned with the low compression 351 and made a fabulous interstate cruiser. Remarkably, in 1972 Ford Australia built 432 outlandish but brilliantly capable XY 250 3-speed manual 4-wheel drive utes with seriously high ride height and off-road tyres. Definitely an idea ahead of its time. Mark, did the XY GT achieve the best race results of any Falcon?
Well, certainly to that point, and it was also destined to have a very long service life on the racetrack. The third and final phase of Ford Australia's 1970s competition program resulted in a car that has become a legend. The HO, or handling option, available on the XY Falcon GT raised the local performance benchmark to unprecedented heights and produced a trio of major victories over 3 seasons, which guaranteed the Phase 3's immortal status as the king of Aussie muscle cars. The Phase 3 GTHO was in effect a nose-to-tail mechanical refinement of its Bathurst-winning Phase 2 predecessor based on the previous XW Falcon GT, with the most noticeable changes being the famous shaker engine air intake and an adjustable rear spoiler. It was also faster and more durable. It was released just in time for the annual Bathurst 500 in 1971, where in qualifying, Works driver Alan Moffat shattered the lap record by more than 13 seconds to take pole position before pulverising his opponents in the race with sheer pace. Moffat finished 1 lap clear of the field, smashing the race record by more than 20 minutes. Phase 3s also finished second and third outright and filled the top 8 places in their class. It was a devastating performance. John, looking back on that, a classic example of that. Fastest Phase 3 during the Bathurst 500 down Conrod Straight, 151 mile an hour on the police radar, which is what, 240 something kilometres an hour. Is there anything that was capable of that performance in the world?
No, well, perhaps the Mercedes-Benz 300 SE or 6.3, if it was set up and blueprinted for racing, might have. But, stock road tests gave its top speed as anywhere between 127 and 137 miles an hour. Certainly not anywhere near 150.
Just extraordinary,
Ferocious.
wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, an HO was about 5,000 something back in those days, and the Merc was like
5 times as much,
yeah,
and the same amount of money, the Mercedes, as a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow.
It was just extraordinary value, wasn't it?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, incredible. The Phase 3 was due for replacement by the latest XA-based Phase 4 in time for Bathurst 1972. However, the political fallout from a media-driven supercar scare killed the GTHO program and saw Ford revert to the XY, fitted with the Phase 4's new lightweight alloy wheels. Tyre and brake trouble ensured the Phase 3's defeat at Bathurst, but other major endurance race victories by John Goss and Alan Moffat delivered Ford the manufacturer's championship. New touring car rules in 1973 caused lengthy delays for the factory team in developing new XA GT hardtops. So, as a stopgap measure, once again, the venerable Phase 3 was called on for its third and final tour of duty. Despite spirited competition from Holden's Peter Brock, Alan Moffat and his Phase 3 duly delivered, winning the Australian Touring Car Championship in a fitting finale for the legendary Falcon GTHO. Remember, you can build your own virtual garage on the Shannons Club website.
My name is Mark. This is my GTHO Phase 3. This particular car is one of the first 50 built in the 5th month of 1971. The car was basically as it was on the outside. It was painted back in the early 90s. It has a close ratio 4-speed transmission and a 3.5 to 1 31 spline differential in it. I tidied up the engine bay on it. Basically the rest of the car inside is original. I always have been passionate about Fords. My dad had XYs when I was a kid, so I've always had a love for these cars. This was a 1971 Bathurst winner. I think the first 7 were GTHO Phase 3s, so they were a magnificent car. What made this car so special for me is the vermilion fire colour. It was the most popular colour made. Also, it was the Alan Moffat Bathurst winning colour. Do I use the car? Yes, I do. I drive it frequently. Try not to knock too many miles up in it, but I do drive it a lot. It drives superbly. It's one of the better ones I've owned out of all the XYs that I've had in my time. I am a Shannons customer. This car was actually used in the Shannons Insurance commercial. Great crew of blokes, so yeah, I've always stuck with them. My future plans for the car is to hang on to it at this stage. I'll probably never sell it.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borobon is here with some market advice on the XY Falcon. Welcome, Christoph.
Hello, John. How are you?
Welcome, mate.
Hello.
XY Falcon, typical of Aussie Falcons, huge range of cars, sedans, wagons, utes, panel vans, ZD Fairlane, up to a 351 V8 option.
That's right.
And of course, the XY GT and GTHO. I mean, this is a lot of cars, isn't it?
It's a big range in the XY, wasn't it?
Big choice.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what's the pecking order? Everyone naturally thinks XY, GT, GTHO. Is that the way it is?
Yeah, that's the way it is. I think that the GTHO obviously is the
phase 3.
The phase 3
Yeah.
is the most desirable you can get.
Yep.
Followed obviously by your GTs, and then down into your Fairmont GSs and your Fairlane. Your K Codes 351 Fairlanes are very sought after today, and then you keep on going through the range. Your wagons, your utes. The rare 4x4 utes.
That's what I mean,
right,
yeah.
Yep.
There's only 432 of those built, and in some cases they're rarer than some GT models, so they must be becoming more collectible now.
I'd say the survival rate's fairly low on those. And
they had a pretty hard life.
Yeah, you don't see too many. I think some of them that are out there are fairly tightly held by collectors. Yep.
Yeah, good stuff.
So is it fair to say that any XY Falcon,
That's what it seems like.
an X Silvertop, they're all collectible?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's interesting. I think the XY range has done very, very well for Ford, and it's most of the models are collectible, but I think it really comes down to having that. It's got to be a well restored or well preserved example.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the key to it. And in recent times we've seen some really well preserved and unrestored examples come through, and I think they've fetched as much or in great interest compared to some of the other cars.
Well, it's only original once.
That's right, correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And the GTHO, I mean, it's always been the price leader, and we've seen it go into astronomical prices sometimes, and it settles down, but it still remains, by far the most expensive XY collectible.
It does, yeah. It's probably fair to say it's probably the most highly valued Ford, Australian-built Ford.
That's right. And with those HOs, if you could compare apples with apples, if you had two identical cars, is there one colour combination that is particularly sought after, or some colour combinations that will actually command a bit of a premium?
I think that's the case as well. We look at colours with the GTHO range, and they're, some of the colours were built in much lesser numbers. Your wild violets, your true blues. Vermilion Fire's always been a very popular colour, but there's those rare options. Wild violet, white trim.
Some even had vinyl roofs.
That's right.
Small number, yeah.
Sunroof option. There's some of the variants on these cars really, play to the value of the cars.
Well, some would be almost like one-offs.
That's right,
yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, to allow the Phase 3 to use the Phase 4's alloy wheels at Bathurst in '72, Ford famously sent out 200 sets of these wheels free to GTH owners so they could get it homologated. So you see these cars now with those beautiful Globe Bathurst wheels, that must be like an extra little thing, an extra historical significance?
If they're original, yes.
If
absolutely.
they're original.
Correct. I mean, there's been some replicas obviously made over the years, and, but I think to get an original set is, quite sought after today.
Now I can imagine the spare parts backup for these cars must be massive because it's so popular.
It is. I mean, Australia-wide, there's a great following, there's great backup, great service. There's sort of cars that, most people can work on. And I think, the popularity of the cars have really lent themselves for, remanufacture of parts over the years. We've seen plenty of that happen, but I think the original parts today, the original Fomoco parts are very, very sought after.
So it was a classic when it was new, and if anything, it's even more of a classic now.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a classic again now, yeah.
For sure.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Christoph. And remember, you can get all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website.
If you'd like your own race image of the XY Falcon in competition, visit the huge archive at autopics.com.au. John, reflecting on the XY Falcon, in its last year on sale, it was against the HQ Holden, and it maintained very, very strong sales, didn't it?
When you think about it, the XY was the last expression of the theme that had come in September 1966 with the XR.
The XR, yeah.
And for that car to be competitive and seen as competitive against the whole new generation HQ was quite remarkable. It shows the respect that the Falcon brand had built up in those few years, and of course the halo effect of the Phase 3 and so on.
The GT and the GTHO program. But also I think that trust that built up in that model, if you go back to 1966, by the XY, Australians had just grown to trust and love this car because Ford had developed it and developed it and developed it. It was absolutely bulletproof by the time they got to XY, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and there was also a following for the more macho or muscular look that the Falcon still had compared with even the new HQ, which was seen by many as just a little bit too soft.
Yeah, quite soft, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was an incredible car, the XY, and it's no surprise that it's remained so popular over
Absolutely.
time. Yeah. We hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the eternally popular XY Falcon, and we hope you can join us next time for Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.